the examiner wants you to choose a process for making. So this is part of the making principle section of the course. So there is perforating a piece of card, cutting a curved edge in a piece of plywood, milling a flat surface on a piece of metal, drilling a hole in a piece of plastic. So you need to choose one. It's the command word is select one. Okay, select one of the activities listed below. Well, what I've done is I've pre-prepared and I've answered all the ones that you could choose. So let's go through each one by one. The only one I haven't chosen is well, the only two I haven't chosen is piping the edge of a cushion and soldering a component leg to a PCB, because you haven't done any of this in key stage 3. So let's go to the answers. So let's zoom in. So the first one is perforating a piece of card. So you get marks for showing the steps. I've only written down 2 steps, but the more detail you have, the better. And you'll also get marks for showing the tools and equipment that you would use. So obviously a craft knife, a cutting mat, the piece of paper you're going to be working with. A safety rule could have been drawn in here as well. So the examiner would expect you to put down those pieces of equipment, and also to explain step by step how you would actually go about answering the question. Okay, so let's go back to the exam question and let's have a look at the next one. Next one, cutting a curved piece in a piece of plywood. So essentially that's a piece of timber. So you would probably mark out, first of all, on a piece of plywood using either a template or a compass. Once you're happy with your outcome, you will then place the piece of work, or also known as a workpiece, inside a vise. You will then use an appropriate tool such as a coping saw to cut the curves, because we know that a coping saw can cut around curves. You could also use a scroll saw, which I don't think any of you guys have actually come across, but you can research that and find out what a scroll saw is as well. Okay, the other ones that you could answer are the following. So milling a flat surface on a piece of metal. Okay, so a milling machine looks a bit like a drill. Okay, it looks like this machine over here. It has a bed which can be moved along the X and Y axis and also along the Z axis over here. So you would mark out your billet or your piece of work, which is the metal block. You would check the surface with a surface gauge to see if it's flat. If it's not flat, you would then decide that you're going to actually mill it out using a tool bit, appropriate tool bit for milling the surface of the workpiece. You would then place the workpiece on the platform, secure it into place, and then you would adjust the height and how much metal you're going to remove on each pass, and then you would actually mill the surface step by step, okay, using the bed to move it back and forth along the X and Y axis. The next one that we could actually look at is drilling a piece of plastic. Now this one everyone should be able to do. So essentially what you would start off with is marking out on the piece of plastic, preferably acrylic, using the appropriate tools and equipment. So you could use a permanent marker, or you could use a scribe, which would scratch the surface of the plastic. The disadvantage is that if you make a mistake, you can't remove it. You would mark it out, and then you would place the work onto the platform of the drill press, or the pillar drill. You will then secure in place using appropriate clamping tools such as a G clamp or a quick release clamp. You will then set the height of your workpiece. You would position the drill bit, or actually put the appropriate drill bit into the chuck using a chuck key, and then what you would then do is set the machine, make sure everything's correct, goggles on, okay, move the armatures on the drill press, move it down, and then drill the hole through the acrylic as appropriately. Okay, so that's how you would answer it. So you would get marks for tools and equipment mentioned, and also for the steps that you would go through. So one thing to remember is, when it comes to making, you always begin with preparation, which is the marking out. Okay, then it's the process. So it could be cutting, grinding, drilling, whatever step comes next, and then you would check your work to see if it's done. Okay, and then if you need to do some more, you would continue. Okay, so now let's move on to the next question, which is question 18. It says, designers often consider social issues when designing and manufacturing products. Examples include ensuring safe working conditions, reducing oceanic pollution, and reducing negative impacts on others. Evaluate the importance of considering social issues when designing and manufacturing products. So it's a 10-mark question. Okay, so obviously you need to be going into detail. So let's begin. So this is what I would do. So first of all, let me break it down. So to get the 9 to 10 marks, you need to show an excellent understanding um, of all the points, and you have to evaluate in depth. Okay, and also you need to justify. So you need to explain why you put things down. Okay, so that's how you get the 9 to 10 marks. So let's have a go at trying to answer this question. So okay, so you may use the following points for further evaluation in order to demonstrate your understanding. So first off, I would start by talking about the safe working conditions. So underneath safe working conditions, these are. So you would say um, products are made in factories that conform to safety legislation. So this is legislation passed by Parliament, okay, or a country's executive what's it arm of its government that sets laws and regulations. So these could be European wide or worldwide agreed standards. Okay, so you might say, for example, workers should have access to appropriate tools and equipment for protection. Without these, so you could justify by saying without these, they would be injured. Okay. This can cost extra money for companies that have to follow these rules. But if a company doesn't, so you justify again, follow the rules, fines may be greater than the cost of complying. Okay, so you can start another paragraph. So in the UK, so you can talk about in the UK, which is what they really want you to talk about. There are strict legislation to protect the safety of workers, e.g., health and safety at work Act is heavily enforced. Okay, so Parliament has passed acts which compel companies to adhere to following these rules. Okay, so, and obviously there are serious implications for them not following these rules. Okay, so that's how you would answer the safety working conditions section. Now, oceanic pollution. So, reducing oceanic pollution. So you have to show the examiner that you understand what is oceanic pollution. Okay, so you would talk about what it is. Oceanic pollution causes damage to marine inhabitants. So, and marine inhabitants are obviously fish and mammals that live in the sea. Okay, or should I say, and habitats. Okay, so that's the areas they live in. So coral reefs, for example, in Australia, etc. Okay, such as coral reefs. Now, plastics. So plastics are a major cause of harm, and other harmful waste. So heavy metals released by companies who produce who in heavy industry can also pollute and poison marine life. So, for example, mercury, which is a heavy metal, causes a lot of damage to marine life. So, plastics and other harmful waste can be ingested by animals as it is mistaken for food. Potentially causing death. Okay, so that's how I would answer that section there. Okay, so let's go back and let's quickly have a look again at what the question is asking us to do. So always check and look out for the command words. So the command words that I can see are the following. Let me just highlight them. Let me get up my commentary section, and so the command word is evaluate. Okay, so obviously you need to explain, justify, okay, what your answers are, and that. So now, so we've answered safe working conditions. We've done reducing oceanic pollution, and now we need to tackle as well reducing negative impacts on others. So it's asking you, basically, this question is asking you 3 sections that you need to answer. Okay, so there's 3 sections you need to answer, and these are all social issues that designers have to consider when designing and manufacturing products. So there's three parts we need to answer. We've already answered two sections. We need to now answer the third section. So let's now go back to what we was doing before. Okay, so let me just okay. So reducing oceanic pollution has been answered now. Now the next section is for us to answer reducing negative impact on others. So reducing negative impact on others. So what do they mean by this question? By this phrase as well? This is referring to environmental impact of designing. So product mileage, carbon footprinting, or carbon footprint. So the amount of carbon that's released through the life cycle of a product, the amount of mileage that the product will travel in its life cycle from being made to being disposed of. All these are major negative impacts on others, and in particular on the environment. So this is how I would tackle the question. So first of all, I would talk about things like consideration of social or carbon footprint must be considered by designers when they produce a product. Designers must consider the negative impact of carbon footprint, and then you will explain what it is. This is the amount of carbon released in the life cycle of a product. So the larger the carbon footprint, the greater the negative impact. Okay. And then you could also talk in general about the kind of things that designers have to think about. So they have to think about things like the use of materials, or sorry, say the selection of materials will have an impact which could be negative on society and the environment. So you could talk about, for example, so you could say, so justify that, you could say, for example, if designers select non-renewable resources or unsustainable materials, such as, hold on a second, let me move that down so you can see that, such as Apologies for such a long one, such a long response, but this is a 10-mark question, so you need to go into detail and justify things. Okay, for example, if designers select non-renewable resources or unsustainable materials such as timber sourced from the rainforest, this could lead to the acceleration of deforestation. Okay, another example, in the fashion industry, and you can use examples like this because it's still pertinent, it still relates to design and technology. In the fashion industry, I've done a lot of mistypes, so please ignore that. Okay, fashion industry, I'll go back and try and correct them. Is the selection of faux or fake fair which encourages unethical suppliers to source real fur, which is actually cheaper now than the synthetic type. Okay, so you could answer the question doing that, using that. Okay, so let's just quickly go back and review this because it's quite important. So let me just get up my comments. Okay, so for example, so safe working conditions, so the kind of things you want to be talking about is things like safety legislation. Oops, sorry guys, I can't seem to be able to highlight it. Okay, but anyway, so safety legislation. Okay, protecting workers, government putting into place acts which compel manufacturers to follow safe working conditions, and then talking about reducing oceanic pollution, so not necessarily using plastics, okay, and considering the use of appropriate materials which do not lead to the pollution in the ocean. Um, so reducing negative impact on others would be things like social and carbon footprinting. This must be considered by designers. So what kind of impact do the things they design have on society as a whole? For example, their selection of materials could lead to greater carbon footprints, or even where they source or they decide to make products um, will also affect how or what happens in terms of the impact on the environment and on society. And then you could give examples of the selection of materials or tools and equipment, well, materials or sourcing of where things will be manufactured and how that could actually affect society and the environment as a whole. Okay, so I'm gonna stop this video now. So I actually plan to have just 3 parts, but it looks like I'm gonna have to have 4 parts because this is 24 minutes long. Okay, so I'm gonna play the next one. I'm gonna record the next one after this.